That was a Control-Alt-Delete.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Red Hat Advanced Cluster Management Presents. It's not a mouthful, it's a product. Today I'm joined by Scott Behrens and the wonderful team from our RHACM program developments. And Scott, do you want to introduce everybody? Just kind of do around the horn real quick.
So Chris, I was on your show a few weeks ago. We talked about the end-to-end. Today I thought I'd bring in some real muscle. We had to bring our VP and our senior architect last time. And I think we're going to go a step better this time. So I've got Randy George. I don't know if that's left or right. He's in the Pink Floyd shirt. He's our architect that leads the observability pillar within RHACM. I've got Joydeep Banerjee, based out there in sunny Southern California. He's the technical lead that focuses on observability, search, analytics, all the goodness in there. And then Chris Doan, who brings our SRE perspective to the table today. Chris is based in Austin with me and Randy. Chris really helps us to dig into the bowel of the system and understand what's breaking and why and how do we fix it. So we're actually going to use ACM to fix ACM and look at some problems about how we tie it all together, which is pretty fun.
That's amazing.
As you can see, Chris, I brought a little bit of a gray hair element because I really wanted to age up the demographic of the Twitch viewing audience. I knew.
Okay. I mean, I guess I appreciate that. We like diversity. I mean,
bona fide gray hair on the table today in Twitch. You've seen it all.
Yeah. So I mean, I have gray hair. If I had a beard, it would be gray. So there you go. I have some gray hair. Okay. Like. My father went completely white at 40 years old. I did not. So
if technology doesn't give you gray hair, then your family will. How about that?
Yeah. That's what happens when you work with Scott.
Come on, man.
Yeah, I only have to talk to Scott every once in a while. That's why I don't have as many gray hairs, right?
Lucky.
That's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
So, Chris, we have a release coming up in about a week.
Yeah, y'all were showing off some stuff last week at Ansible Fest, weren't you? Or week before last? When was it? Geez, I don't even remember.
2 weeks ago, Ansible Fest, and we had the integration of Ansible and the application management. Mm-hmm. So today we get to look at the observability piece, kind of dissect what we do there. We're bringing a new architecture in play, and I'm going to stop talking there because I don't want to ruin it for Randy. So take it away, Randy. What are we doing?
So thanks, Scott. Yeah, so I'll give you a little bit of kind of the problems we're solving first, and then I'll take you into the high-level architecture, how I approached it, right? So as you know, and you've talked about this, what does RHACM do, right? And you can break it down into simplicity, cluster lifecycle management, application lifecycle management, and governance, risk, and compliance, right? Well, if you think about it, it's very hard to do cluster lifecycle management, application lifecycle management, if you don't have insight into the health of your clusters and your applications, right? You can't, obviously, you want to meet your corporate SLOs, et cetera, but why would I want to deploy an app to an unhealthy cluster? I'm definitely not going to meet my SLOs, right? For example. Exactly. So the key thing that we want to do is provide that insight. And we're doing that, as Scott mentioned, by adding observability. And again, this is a step along a roadmap. Observability is quite complex. And so don't take it as what we show you today is the end game by any stretch of imagination. It's the beginning, right? And so we have some key focus. Initially, we're going to focus on clusters, right? And then we'll get to the app layer. And Scott will take us through that roadmap, so I don't want to steal his thunder, touche. And so some of the things I talked about first was the health, right? And we'll get into some of that. Another thing, and we've heard this from customers quite a bit, as the various development teams are working on their projects and then they're deploying them to the clusters. What do? They request, through kube requests, they request a certain amount of compute resources, memory, CPU, et cetera. And what they're finding is their costs are not being managed because these teams are requesting more than they're actually using, right? So they'll come in and they'll find out that I'm reserving X amount of CPU or X amount of memory, and I'm only using 1/10 of it, for example. And that's a cost. It's real cost to get the compute resources. It's cost of OCP that they're running on or whatever kube, runtime they're running on, et cetera. Mm-hmm. So they want to get their costs in control as well, right? So it's not just make sure everything's healthy and stable. That's very important, but also make sure everything's optimized, right? So those are kind of things. And then kind of, I call it the third facet is, we detect issues like governance risk, et cetera. We're going to detect, monitor the health, and we can, send alerts and notifications. Well, the SRE gets notified. How does he or she go about problem determination? Well, you think about the simple pattern. What's an SRE do? Well, they form in their mind a hypothesis of what caused the problem, right? And so they have to either go prove or disprove that, right? And if they can prove it, they obviously provide a fix or run a script to compensate for that. Or if they disprove, they come up with a new one. So they need a way to be able to interact and introspect the data, right? So it's not just dashboards, right? Dashboards are great for status. They're horrible for problem solving, right? And so that's kind of the third facet. And Joydeep and Chris will demonstrate some of this. We'll show you our capabilities for, and introspecting the data and discovering problems. And so the focus we'll have, and they'll demonstrate this later, is in this draft, we're collecting metrics from the clusters, like I said. We also have the ability to collect logs. Now the approach is slightly different. And what I do is I'll switch over to a picture. Picture's worth 1,000 words. That way you don't have to look at me as well, because somebody else is sharing. Oh, Scott, are you want to go through that or not?
No, you got it. I was sharing just our value pick.
Okay, yeah. So let me share this diagram way we're going about it. Hopefully you can see okay.
There you go.
Is so the other thing we had to think about is not just the capabilities, but some of the challenges. The challenges get to be with scale, right? The number of managed clusters that we're going after, and also the size of those clusters. These aren't servers, they're clusters, right? And so how many nodes, how many pods, how many namespaces, et cetera. Then you also have to get into the concept of long-term store, because especially when you're looking at things like SLOs or even compliance. I don't know if I'm having noticed where I became out of compliance. Well, we want to look back over time. How many times that happened in the last month, the last year? Are you seeing a pattern, right? We can look for pattern detection, et cetera. Metrics, you can look at trend analysis. So we needed to have historical data, long-term historical data, as well as the ability to scale all these time series that are required to collect, right? So there's a couple of challenges. So this diagram's a real high-level diagram of our approach of how we've gone after it. So starting at the bottom up, if you look, those are the clusters that are being managed by ACM, ACM being kind of that dotted diagram above, and that's a small subset of the ACM hub. We've added the concept of observability add-on, right? So ACM deploys a cluster with a set of add-ons, and when you install 2.1 or upgrade to 2.1, this add-on will be dynamically or automatically deployed and configured to these systems, these managed clusters, if you would. Anytime a change happens with respect to the configuration, they're constantly connecting back up to the hub server, and they'll detect a change and they'll apply the change. So the configuration is sure to be uniform across all those, right?
So that's, hold on, so pause there real quick, because that's a key piece we talked about last week, Chris, was our desired state, or 2 weeks ago. That desired state model, we play in this Kubernetes world, we set the way we want it to be for an application or for the configuration of a cluster, and then we work up to that. And so what we're doing in 2.1, this isn't even something you're paying for, it's in the box. You're gonna get this observability add-on that brings this next layer of cluster health monitoring into your purview automatically. So I mean, that desired state model is something we are all about here, and just want to make sure that we're on the same page with how you deliver this, how you deliver that quality.
Yeah, and that's a great point, Scott. Thanks. In fact, I want to add one thing. You mentioned about this is there in the box. The one thing we did do is, so we installed 2.1, everything for observability is installed. It's just not enabled out of the box. All right, and you have to do one apply, create a CR to enable it. And the reason being, if there are customers, and this could even be in test or whatever, maybe you don't want to be collecting all this data. Collecting the data, storing the data can be expensive, right? Yeah. And if you don't want the capability, we're not going to force you to have the persistent storage required. We're not going to force you to collect all this data that you're not interested in using, so you don't have to enable it, right? So one step to enable is really what you need, and then automatically everything, like Scott said, you define the desired state with that enablement, and everything will comply with that desired state. And if you decide to change any configuration, again, everything will get deployed and synchronized with that desired state. Okay. So we have an add-on, and initially for OpenShift clusters, there's already a built-in Prometheus that scrapes and collects all types of data. We collect from that Prometheus. We can collect from other sources, but in the initial draft, we'll scrape from that Prometheus. Now we don't gather everything. I mean, there's many time series, and they can be quite expensive down there. We're collecting a subset of that, right? And what we think are key and optimal, right? That's kind of general purpose across all customer needs. These are the metrics that will be important. If you want to extend that list, you can, right? So we have the ability for a config map where you can extend the list. So if I'm going to make this up a simple number, like if we collect 10 and you wanted 12, you can add the other 2 to the config and it'll start collecting, right? So going after that, so everything is collected and brought forward. And technology-wise, we knew in Kubernetes management, Prometheus, and when I mention Prometheus, I kind of mean the Prometheus ecosystem, the community, if you would. It's the de facto standard, right? So we had to comply. So we want to make sure we're compliant with things like PromQL, which is the query language, right? A lot of people have skills in that. We want to make sure that we support Grafana. A lot of people use Grafana and have skills in that. We want to take advantage of the alerting capabilities right there. We want to take advantage of the open metric format that Prometheus uses, and a lot of people in the whole ecosystem of enabling metrics through an endpoint. So we're doing all that. However, we're adopting the Thanos technology for our storing of metrics over Prometheus, which is built off of the Prometheus engine. It's compatible. It just provides, using object stores the back end, it provides the ability to do that long-term storage, right, that we require. Now, go ahead.
So pause here for a sec, because take a breath and think about how, think about how we had a solution which was a federated Prometheus model. Right. And that was about a year ago. And we sat down and talked with Christian Heidenreich, and comes from the CoreOS background, has all the understanding of the monitoring space, observatorium that's being used internally with Red Hat, gathering telemetry from thousands of connected clusters. All that runtime knowledge over the past couple of years of Red Hat Cloud is now in this project, is now in ACM. So we take that goodness, as Randy was just talking through Thanos and the data store scalability, the long-term retrieval, all of that baked in goodness with production runtime code around it is now part of the ACM story. So instead of a federated Prometheus model that falls over, doesn't handle scale, we have it. It's here. It's Thanos, and it's the Prometheus architecture. So I want to make that point clear, because we had to re-architect what we've brought here alongside OCP to really ensure that it's scaled out to that multi-cluster challenge, to make sure that it would really open up the opportunity for edge and for edge cases.
Yep. And Thanos is a huge problem solver in CNCF project, and there's no reason for us not to use it, right? Like it's the more the merrier, in my opinion.
It was a no-brainer at that point, but it's going to be a lot of work. So 6 months later, here we are.
Well, good for y'all.
Yeah, Scott, you're spot on. I mean, we Red Hat have been running this in a production use, and what we've learned and what we've updated, those are PRs in the Thanos community. So we've helped to evolve and mature that product, right?
Yeah, bring that enterprise knowledge that we have, our backgrounds in observability. In fact, I didn't even give you guys a chance to introduce yourselves and talk about who you are. So maybe
that was my fault. That was my fault.
It was mine.
I'll take blame for that.
Oh, come on.
Well, I've been streaming all day. It feels like I've introduced 1,000 people, so I'm sorry. So, Joydeep, you had something to say, but please introduce yourself as well.
Okay. My hair has been gray or white, however you call it, since I was 25. I'm only 30 now.
Yeah.
Okay. Fair enough.
But yeah, I've been playing with this world of containers before Kubernetes came into being. And one of my first introductions into containers was using Docker, Ansible, and OpenStack using HeatYam.
Yeah.
So that was quite a while back.
Yeah. That's a ways to go. Yeah.
Interesting thing about what we are doing here, is Randy mentioned that everything out here is well known to the community. Thanos, Prometheus, PromQL, every alert manager, everything is very well known. So once you guys start using it, you can get to the internals of this very quickly and ingest all the information. So that is key. And the other stuff is this object store where we are storing this long-term time series data is what you own, is what you set up. And you can set it up in S3, GCP, Ceph,
wherever.
Yeah.
Sure. Yep.
Randy, please introduce yourself since Scott couldn't.
Yeah, Scott tried. So yeah, obviously Randy George, and so long time in this industry, and probably been doing management for the last probably 15 to 20 years, right? And focused on observability. Well, I'm going to go back when we first started doing. I was with IBM before we moved over to Red Hat and doing autonomics. So it's been probably a good 10-ish years been doing on the observability side, focused on network and clusters, and kind of what Joydeep said was experience on the kube side of managing the kube. I mean, we ran a kube in SaaS production platform when it was like 0.7 release, I think, way back, right? And so there was no EKS back then, or IKS or AKS or anything. It was, and so we ran just vanilla kube and managed ourselves and kind of learned from that on the way up. So it was kind of a good way to learn because there weren't a lot of capabilities back then, or a lot of brute force they had to do it. So a lot of experience in managing kube from that perspective, a lot of experience in observability and management in general.
Awesome. And no call would be complete at Red Hat without multiple Chris's. So please, Chris Doan, introduce yourself.
Yes, that's right. I mean, I've been on many calls with 4 or 5 Chris's, so I'm glad.
I was on a call the other day and I was the only Chris, and someone said, "Hey, Chris, I think this is you." And I was like, "Oh, me? Oh, I'm the only Chris here? This is amazing." So please introduce yourself, Chris.
Yes, sir. Hi, my name is Chris Doan, and I'm representing the S3 perspective on this call. I've been in the industry for a long time, and in my current role, I actually wear multiple hats. So right after this call, I'm probably going to jump off and do some DevOps CI/CD work with our Jenkins cluster. But yeah, I use ACM, our product internally, and I try to evangelize its usage throughout our community. But yeah, I use it on a daily basis, trying to deploy applications and try to break it in different ways. So I'm excited to showcase that later on.
Awesome.
Yeah, and that's actually a really key point is folks like Chris that, like you said, he uses the product, right? And if we can't buy value out of it, how do we expect our customers, right? So we actually, eat our own dog food, or some people like say drink our own champagne, however you want to look at it. And we get that benefit. That's a huge benefit, right? Of using that and getting real-time feedback, early feedback, and help iterate and mature the product, right? So the only other thing I wanted to call out here is in addition to the object store where metrics and alerts are stored, and again, looking for long-term trends and pattern recognition. And again, Joydeep and Chris will demonstrate some of this. We also collect information about all the resources and their relationships on these managed clusters, and as well as some of the key attributes and metrics, near term, the now metrics, not the trend, that's under Thanos. And we store that in a Redis search database that has a GraphDB plugged in, right? And this becomes very powerful for querying and introspecting the data, especially when you want to understand the relationships. These clusters, as you know, a lot of relationships that are very dependent on each other, whether it's be the flow of the app or where things are deployed and relationships with other things there, et cetera, right? Could be causing issues, right? So we have that kind of other database there to provide that sort of capabilities, okay? Another key pillar of observability is not just metrics and the alerting and inventing is, but logs are critical, right? And especially as, you know, Chris said, to be an SRE, you got to, hey, how am I going to solve problems that understand what's going on, need logs. As you can tell from the diagram, a lot of people are into log collection, log storage. There's a lot of value you can do that if applying anything, but it's also very, very, very expensive, both network bandwidth, storage, etc. Our approach currently, we may look into down the road, centrally storing logs, especially for something like Edge, and that may need to, but right now we have more of an on-demand approach, right? So if you're looking into solving an issue on cluster A, if you would, we can go out and grab the logs in your real time, pull them over to the hub server and utilize them. So it's more of an on-demand approach, collecting the logs and being able to search those logs and use them versus let's collect them, store them, and hopefully someday search them.
Maybe, yeah.
And Randy, I think one of the other fun things is that not everybody has access to log into the fleet of clusters, right? Or neither is it possible. So we can actually centrally do it from one place, which is awesome.
Yeah. I mean, that's a great point. I mean, we're not launching over to that cluster and looking at log. We're dynamically pooling them on demand, right? So it's still a log collection approach. It's an on-demand versus a continuously collecting them.
Right. I mean, this is something we use all the time to debug, you know, as you said, our own dog food.
Yeah. We talked about that a few weeks ago, Chris. You remember with Michael and Dave and Jeff, how we ran into this problem in our own development, you know, in creating our own Kubernetes platform. We said, well, now we got a bunch of these clusters, and how do we introspect them, and how do we dynamically gather information about them? And that's where the Redis graph, the search collector, started to develop. That kind of became the core central theme of that multi-cluster management. Really trying to solve that problem internally, and that became the start of the next 2 years project for us.
Yep.
So who's bored of slides? Raise your hand. All right, let's wake up some developers out there. Get your coffee tuned up. Who's taking the screen share?
So I mean, since we were talking about search and viewing logs, why don't I jump over and, you know, have a session as well, right?
Perfect.
So let me do the screen share. Share desktop. Okay, all right.
Screen sharing, here we go.
Yep.
All right,
Can
cool.
you guys see my screen?
Yeah.
Okay, all right. So this is, you know, let's, so we didn't show the screen as we didn't show our launch-in, you know, when you go into RHACM, I didn't show how that page looks like. Well, you'll land up in this home page, right? But what I think I tend to use most is our search page, right? Almost everything that you can see, you can get it centrally from here, and this is very ad hoc-ish in nature, right? So let's look at, let me give you a real example. So I'm looking at pods, and what this is showing is the relationship pod has to other things that we are collecting, right? So we actually have pods over 9 clusters. The pods are related to 1100 secrets. They're running on 44 nodes, et cetera, right? Now, we had this real case where we had pods running in multiple clusters, which had the name something like this. If I can type.
I've seen these pods, yes.
Right? And see, here's the fun starts. These pods we are showing are across really multiple clusters. They're across the fleet. And going back to the logging thing, you know, you could click on a pod. So this is in a cluster which is named Oregon 2. You can click on the pod, and not only can you see the YAML, you can look at the logs, right? You can look at the logs to see what they're doing. Response time 200, okay, right?
Cool.
This is cool. Now, the real issue that we had is, and Chris is aware about it, he and I, we were on the same boat. During development, we had, you know, what do you call it? We had a blip, let's put it that way. So we really needed to restart all the, it never happens normally, but you know, once in a while.
It was a bug.
So we had to restart the pods, right? What do? Go here and just delete the pod. The pods are restarted. That's huge. That was huge, you know. And in real life situations, as you can imagine, developers do not always have access to log into all of the managed clusters. We are doing that all from one single place, right?
One pane of glass.
One pane of glass, right? And the introspection, I guess, is one of the other very important things. You know, given
before you go there, just in that use case, the way we have this set up is we have our alert manager configured to talk to a Slack channel, right? So if we detect a problem, we notify Slack, right?
Good point.
And then, so he didn't just come into here cold, right? And say, let me look for a pod with this name, right? So we'll actually detect a problem by collecting the data, analyzing the data, and doing notifications. And then he came into here and said, let me go see what's going on with this pod because it's problematic. And that's where he'll find it through that search, right?
Right. And talking about detecting problems, yes, we have configured alerting rules, right? Same way as we do it in good old Prometheus. So let's take a quick look at that. Example of an alerting rule. And this you guys can obviously go and change. So this is a very familiar alerting rule. In fact, in this example, we have a recording rule created, as well as we have some other rules created, and we have configured the alert manager. And this is pretty well known to, if you're working with Prometheus, it's pretty well known. You go and configure the alert manager to Slack and send to pager. In this example, I think in this cluster, I've commented out the pager, but anyway, you're sending it to Slack and boom, that's how it launches to where Andy said. You're getting the details in Slack and it's giving you the details, relevant details, and you can jump back to ACM by clicking here, right? So cool. As Randy said, you're not coming in from cold.
Yeah.
But where I was going with this search thing is, given a problem, right? Let's assume Scott and Randy are two brilliant engineers who has been given a problem to solve, right? And they have some history, some background, so they might approach the problem differently. You know, a classic case is, which I think you folks can relate to it very well, is some people, when they are told there's a problem, would like to log into a container and look at the logs to see what is going on, right? Whereas there could be other folks who might want to come in from inside out. You know, they might want to see, hey, what all has been created in the last hour, and let me filter from down there, right?
What changed, right?
Yeah, and I want to be a little careful, Randy, as you know,
yep.
We don't actually fully, it's in our roadmap, we are not exactly capturing what has changed. Change has nuances. We are capturing right now what has been created. There could be things that has changed which are not yet created. We are trying to get there. But yeah, exactly. So there can be different ways of looking at this problem, right? And we capture this all no matter which way you look at. And talking about eating our own dog food, if you want to explore how the multi-cluster observability works, Randy mentioned in the beginning that we have a CR, right? So our little CR is, if you go to kind, it is multi-cluster observability, click on the CR, boom. This shows you the relationship around the CR. So imagine, guys, I mean, this is very real, right? You are, I mean, something is pushed on you. You have to take ownership. You have to discover what's in there. This is telling you that this CR, I mean, typically the things that I would personally look at is, first of all, what's the route? Who is accessing what I am, what this is serving? So there's a related route, okay? And it's the observatory API. In fact, this is the route through which everybody is looking at the metric data, right? And what are the services? What are the related services? This is not only, I mean, this is this is a day one tool, this is a day zero tool, you know, however you look at it. And the simple fact that you're sitting in one place and you're having the visibility across all the clusters, that's really awesome.
You see that, you know, in the industry, there's an app SRE, right, who gets handed an application. That's her job to go keep it up and running without any concept of what's in there, what's baked in, what's added, what are these routes and services. And to Jyoti's point, you have the capability to learn, to understand, to use this tool to dissect it and figure out where things are at, how they've been deployed and architected. So that FSRE, who typically just gets handed something and has no clue where to go next, now has a starting point, can pivot around one piece of information to find more, and then understand where to go next in terms of that troubleshooting tree.
Yeah, absolutely. And in real life, this happens so many times because, you know, I've had the experience of working on the other side, on customer shoes and moving applications, monolithic applications, migrating them to cloud. And, you know, if I had this kind of stuff, it would be awfully useful to come up to speed and have control and see what is going on, right? So, Chris, I know you have been using this, right? And you've been using this in lots of different ways. So would you like to share some of your perspective, perhaps?
Yeah, let me take the screen and I can have a little segment.
Have a little fun with it.
Share my screen here.
It's not a segment. We're gonna have a little fun.
A little fun. Yeah.
A little dance. Here it goes.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, he's showing another dance.
Yeah, I really like that.
This is another one.
We talked about how ACM is able to centralize the management of your fleet of clusters. And I really found that in this latest release that we were working on, where internally we have set up this cluster and we try to manage a number of clusters, right? Up to 50 clusters. And we deploy different levels of ACM into this cluster. And like Jyoti was pointing out, sometimes there are bugs in the code. And I was able to use ACM itself to help debug some of these issues, right? So first of all, as an SRE, I also focus on command line interface. So another cool thing within our platform is that we provide this virtual web terminal. I open it here, but you can launch it from this navigation window right here. And within this virtual web terminal, there's also multiple tabs. So I can actually work on multiple contexts at the same time as an SRE engineer. So the first thing that I want to do is, okay, I'm an SRE. I'm trying to maintain the availability of the services on
the
my
meeting has ended
platform.
because it had
What
only
are the
one
managed
participant for the
clusters
last
that I'm
30
looking
minutes.
at, right? So I normally go and look at what are all the managed clusters that are available in my hub. So I run OC-git managed clusters, and these are the available clusters that have registered into my hub, and I can start drilling down onto them. So specifically let's take a look at Singapore. So I can do OC-git or a search, kind pod cluster, and then cluster search kind pod cluster name Singapore. We'll scroll down to Singapore here, and then in a particular namespace. So we were debugging a problem where some of the agents pods were not starting up or deploying appropriately. So with this, I can do the same thing that Joydeep was doing a while ago by searching on a remote cluster for the pods in the agent namespace. And the cool thing is that even though I'm running commands from the command line interface, this is like a pseudo command line with UI widget components. So once I did this list of all the pods in this particular namespace on this particular cluster, I can still leverage some of the widget context and do like filtering. I can also look at the particular pod by clicking on them and inspecting the logs, right? The same way that we're doing it from the UI, but this is like a combination of UI and command line. And
Chris, when you're clicking on that show, you're actually generating a new command line to get, that gets entered, right?
Exactly. Yeah, you can see as I click on this, you'll see the commands generate and then the results being displayed here. So
he stays in a command line environment. It just helps with the ability to enter a very specific, command, right? With all the parameters necessary just by clicking.
Exactly. It's kind of like autocomplete, but on a whole new level. It's generation.
Steroids, right? Autocomplete on steroids.
Yeah. Yeah. It generates the command for you. You don't have to type it and then press tab to complete. Yeah. That's a lot of efficiencies there. But the cool thing is
that's a big step. Again, sorry to interrupt, Chris, but we're talking about an app SRE gets handed a bunch of stuff and has to keep it running. Here's another tool in your pocket that you come back to every day that says, well, I've got this, visual interface, this visual web terminal that allows me to interact with an environment that I don't know a ton of things about, but I'm learning on the fly, right? They spent 6 months building it and I get 6 minutes to understand it. And now it's my job to keep it running. So I can use this to introspect, to make changes, to pull logs, get summaries of events. This is all based on an open source project called KUI, KUI, and it's an Electron-based implementation here, so it feels very similar to Slack and things like that. I'll drop a tag in the chat. But, I bring it to the point to say, like, this open source code and these opportunities we have to flex in here in this multi-cluster problem is really cool stuff. I mean, it's a challenge that we looked to solve from the outside in and bring in some neat technology to solve these issues, but to give Chris, the tools to do his job. So boom, like here he is able to click on things and inspect and move through it in a way that is unbelievable, impossible from just a CLI.
That's correct. And sometimes like Scott was highlighting, all right, you have a problem that you don't know exactly where it is yet, but our tool set, a combination between UI and CLI allows me to transverse the different paths quickly and then narrow down the problem area, right? So I think that's really one of the cool things that's may not be highlighted, but I really have that insight after using the platform for a couple of releases, and in this last one, where I think everything came together, the performance came together, the feature came together, and I was able to experience a problem, locate the source of the issue, fix it, and then we were able to continue on with our work, right? The other thing that I wanted to share was that, so here, I'm using search to pull back the resources and navigating through those resources. But as I'm a command line person, I do want to run OC commands. But if you have to have a session into the remote target, you can. So here I show a terminal where I actually log into one of the remote clusters, and then we can maintain a session or a context to this remote cluster, Singapore, and I can run my CLI commands like OC get cluster, or no, OC cluster info in the context of this remote cluster. And it is the context of Singapore, OC get pods, get a pods in the current namespace. And I can do the same thing. And the cool thing is that the widgets respond, the virtual web terminal responds. We still have a widget. We can click on these items and then inspect like we would do through search. And I can access a lot of the data without having to type a lot of commands.
And to me, right, what you just did right there is so powerful, is went right to the logs in context of that specific pod, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
So
And
you don't have to switch over to some other, log collection mechanism, search for the logs. You're just doing it right in context, and near real time you have the logs there, right?
right. And this is so powerful that, I keep on repeating myself, but it's important that, we use these tools to debug our code. We do that routinely, because at the end of the day, RHACM is just another workload running on OpenShift.
Yeah.
Which uses some sophisticated features of Kubernetes, but that's what it is, right? And I guess the other important thing, Chris, that we were talking about yesterday is the events thing. For example, if your pod is stuck in a state where logs are not yet generated, right? I think in your cluster you do have some containers, Chris, which are in a container creating mode, so no logs are generated.
That's
so
right.
See the events right away and see what's going on.
That's right. So yeah, in the event that we were not able to pull back the relevant data, then of course you can log into the cluster directly and then run the commands to debug the issue. And you can do that from this terminal, and we can maintain the context of that Kubernetes context for you while you're in this session. So yeah, I've used that as well before as well.
Yeah, and then you can of course log into the terminal itself, to the pod, right?
That's right. That's right. You can right here. You can RSH into the remote pod and do any debugging that you need to do. Right. The other another thing that was cool that I recently experienced in Kui was OC Git nodes. So sometimes you might, when you're deploying different products or platforms or applications on an OCP cluster, you might have to actually log into one of the nodes here. So I was able to show the other day that you can actually run OC debug node, and then the node name. And this is probably like advanced technique, but let's see, debug node slash, I don't know, maybe it's not gonna work. OC debug. There you go. Which is kind of cool.
I didn't know this. Wow.
You can actually log into the node and start to debug at an even lower level than the application layer. So I thought that was kind of cool that our Visual Web Terminal supported that as well.
And JD, if you watch Twitch more often, you'll learn things.
Yeah. Just by the way, connected with RBAC. Okay, you can't go and do a bunch of stuff in other clusters if you're not authorized to.
Yep. That's exactly right.
But Chris, could you just show the folks where you click to get onto this wonderful Visual Web Terminal or Kui?
Sure. So if I go to the top menu bar at the top, there are two options. You can actually open the Visual Web Terminal in the current session or open it as a separate tab.
Nice.
That's in there, out of the box.
But
the extra bells and whistles just ready to go, ready for your use.
Right. Okay. So yeah, I when I was doing SRE for our internal cluster, I use Visual Web Terminal a lot because I was mainly focused on CLI, doing things through the CLI. But like Joydeep demoed a while ago, the search capability is also available through the through this component as well.
Yep.
Right. Okay.
so if you
Sorry, Joydeep, I was just going to say, so I mean, what Chris has shown and Joydeep has shown, et cetera, is that the power of observability we're adding to is we're collecting all this data that we talked about. We're storing it in an optimal way to allow you to search, understand relationships, and giving you the tools necessary to quickly introspect the data, right? Through the search capabilities, the Kui or the Visual Web Terminal to make your CLI interface more powerful and be able to access the logs, events, et cetera, in real time and quickly get to the roots of problems, like Chris was saying, that we do in real time and in development, right?
Right, and Randy, where I was going is on the other side. You as a user, you can, or as an SRE, you can configure the alerts you want and you can route them to pager or wherever you want to get woken up, hopefully not.
Was that a pager?
That was kind of a pager.
Oh, okay.
Good timing. Perfect
I
timing.
was in my office.
I mean, you can't beat that timing.
Oh man, Chris, it's no fun being woken up in the middle of the night. I tell you, it is fantastic. Once you're woken up, on 2 consecutive nights at 2 a.m. in the morning, then you know all about the best principles and the best practices and what you need to do to make your life easier, right? Yeah. And I think we are hitting a few of the sweet spots. We are not, I wouldn't say we have won everything, then Scott wouldn't be able to show his roadmap. We have not yet done everything, but we are getting close.
Yeah, but I think you're spot on, JD. And like I said earlier, this is, the initial entry to this space, and we went after some of the major items that are required, right? I mean, you have to, right? And so we still have ways to go, but you could be and Chris demoed this as well, right? Very productive with this initial set capabilities, right?
And Randy, I believe we have not yet shown our dashboards yet, right?
No, but I think, look, Chris, he was showing.
Well, yeah, I just had one more point to show is that a while ago, I was in the Visual Web Terminal, was focused on some of the components for our platform itself. But the same thing applies for applications that you would deploy through our app lifecycle flow. Here's an example of a simple Hello World application. And you can click on search this link, and it will search specifically, fill in the search parameter for those particular fields for that application. And the same thing applied. We were deploying a number of applications in our internal environment, and having this feature where I could select an application that was under focus and quickly have a link to search for the related components for that application allowed me as an SRE to focus on the key parts of that application in terms of whether it was going to have any issues or not, right? So I think that convenience is quite powerful.
And as don't jump off of that one yet. As Joydeep called out earlier, right below that, there's all the relationships that you can navigate with respect to that application, right?
Yep. And one of the key indicators for the reliability or availability of your application has always been the first thing that people ask for is the pod deployed and is it running, right? So with a couple of clicks, I can quickly see whether my pod is running across the expected set of clusters or not, all right? So I thought having that reliability in our platform to be able to show this data was one of the key things this release.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll turn it back over to you, Joydeep, to cover.
No, I mean, and Chris, while you're here, you can use the same search to, for example, to see which policies are being violated, back to the pillar point that Randy and Scott were making earlier, right? 3 pillars. The third pillar is the security. You can see which policies are getting violated across the fleet of clusters here,
Oh, yeah, right here, right?
No, I mean, also through the search, yes.
Through the search.
Oh, okay. Let me look at that.
Yeah, kind,
policy,
and then that's it. Oh, that's another pager. I'm sorry, guys.
Yeah.
Oh, you're fine. Is it actually something breaking that you need to get off the call for?
No.
Okay. I'm just making sure. Like, whatever's broken takes priority over this.
Yeah.
Except some policies are not compliant. So you can again further filter by compliant, not compliant, compliant equal to not compliant, right? So, that's the way you can manage it.
Or I can sort it and focus on the compliant ones and not compliant ones.
Beautiful.
Cool. Okay, I'll stop sharing and I'll give it back to you, Jordy.
Okay, Randy, do you want to show the dashboards or should I go ahead and share?
Doesn't matter, I can.
This is a screen sharing tour de force here. I love it.
Yeah.
Bring on the screen shares. Let's go.
This is where we started the call, Chris, with Chris Short, that is. We talked about the net new, the Thanos architecture, bringing this optimization story to the table.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, and so back when Randy was making the point that the two things that we are stressing on, or inside the metrics collection world, is the health of the cluster and the optimization features and the capacity. So the health of the cluster, the health of the backplane, as we all know, is reliant on the API server, right? API server is the front and the center. So we focus on the API server, and the couple of things that we are highlighting is we are measuring the 99th percentile latency of the API server, and we bring it up here. And obviously, if you have a problem, you can drill down to a cluster and API server. This page is organized in a fashion of the golden signals, right? SRE golden signals. So we are showing the latency, the 99th percentile latency, and we have a threshold. We have put it as 1 second. And then we are showing the request rate and the error messages, right?
Mhm.
So 200 error rate, et cetera, et cetera. The saturation we are measuring by looking at the queue depth. I always get
Scroll down.
by the cursor here.
The outside cursor.
There you go.
No,
The
I
other.
have to try a few times.
There we go.
There you go.
He's a
And we
man.
look at
He doesn't know. Scroll bar.
What's a scroll bar?
What's the scroll bar? We look at the queue depth and the queue rate for saturation. So,
Nice.
this is as far as the cluster health is concerned, right?
I mean, this is the SRE dashboard right here. Boom.
This
done.
is the SRE dashboard, right? Yeah. And then you have the optimization. Back to what Randy was talking about. In real life, we do know this happens constantly. And this is, yeah.
We've had customers talk to us about this and wanting this, right? So it's not just something like you said, Joey, we knew, but been validated. There are real people, real customers coming and asking for these quick insights. And the way this is organized is when you're doing many clusters, these dashboards give you a quick little kind of view of the status, but also which ones do I want to drill into, right? So it's not an I equals 1 to N, go look, but let me come up here, see where ones that I want to attack. You can see, oh, maybe that's a dev cluster. I don't need to look at it, but this one is one I care about and it's red. Let me go drill down, right?
Exactly. And so, here you're seeing that I am utilizing only 16%, but because of my request, I've claimed 51%. And, trust me, there have been cases where, you might be utilizing 16 and your requests are adding up to 99% or something like that. That. Back to the point, Randy, you were making earlier, I think you cannot schedule an app on that cluster anymore.
Right.
Kube will not schedule. And talking about drill downs, you can go all the way down. You can, we are looking obviously at the namespace level here, right? We are looking at the namespace level. And then from a namespace, you can go down all the way down to a pod level as well. So, that feature is there. And
when we ran into this, and like I said, some customers want this insight, and they find that some of these applications, projects, are basically allocating a lot more resources they really need, right? And enables them to set up, quotas, if you like, one way to manage it, right? They also found, as we drilled down, some of these are justifiable, right? If you're running in an HA type environment, right? You are going to reserve more than you are really using because you need that spare, right, running. So, but having the data allows you to determine, is this a real problem or not? You can also look at it as, this is how much I'm using to get HA. Is this really worth it, right?
Yeah.
Assessment, right?
Is the investment worth the functionality? Exactly. Yeah.
Yep. So it seems kind of, basic at the beginning, but you think about it, there's so many people, and you've seen the charts that are now starting to adopt Kubernetes. Last I see about 30-ish% or something, and there was just so much going at it so fast that people really don't have a good governance and really understanding, are people, optimized and controlling their expenses, right? And this is a high level. This isn't cost management, right? But a high level to get a feel for, because we know as developers, hey, it's free. Yeah, more memory. It's so free. It's, you don't have the old day.
It's there.
Yeah, it's there.
It's mine.
Somebody got to use it, right? And it's not like the old days where you got to do, a PO and go through procurement and order and get it in. You wait 90 days or longer. It's there. Use it, right? And you don't see the bill, right? Well, somebody does, right? In the company. So, and so this has been helpful to many customers to get their initial arms, if you would, around the usage, right?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of our customers are like, yeah, we've been using Kubernetes for a while. Okay, let's put on ACM, and then they discover things.
We had one customer telling us that their OpenShift was too expensive to run. I'm like, what do you mean? The license we found out was, well, they're running all of these worker nodes, and they didn't need to, but they're paying by cores, right?
Right.
But they have all of them reserved, but they're not using them, right? And so they were able to roll back to more realistic usage and get their expenses in line, right?
Yeah, and it's just like everything, right? Like you will pay for what you don't use if it's on, right? So be elastic, right? Like be flexible.
We've got a good topic coming up in a few weeks, Chris, where we're going to be able to talk about cluster pools and hibernating, and how CI/CD, how our DevOps team has really educated us on the fact that it's a little bit too easy to spend that money. It's just on.
No, it's super easy to spend that money. Trust me, I know.
Hey, we only got a couple minutes. I know JD, you were going to show some, but did you want to hit roadmap item? But
I mean, let's hit the roadmap items. I was just showing the other feature is we allow data exploration, right? This is again one of my favorite ad hoc interfaces, by which you can use PromQL to query the data. But
yeah,
awesome. You can do the roadmap
story. Since you've got the data, you can pivot around it. We didn't talk much about the trifecta, Randy. We didn't talk about metrics, logs, and trace data, but that's in the future, right? Like we're working towards app monitoring. So today we're delivering cluster health monitoring. That's multi-cluster health monitoring.
Yes.
We'll start to build the direction of app monitoring. We have a story coming together with Loki, which is an upstream open source project that's bringing that log story together for us. And bringing logs and monitoring together, events and alerts, which are in the box today. And then over time, you'll see, Jaeger, that trace aspect of this start to come to the fold. And it's a lot of products that basically assemble into this observability platform. But what we're seeing is customers are already doing it. Like they already have an opinionated point of view on how they want to put it together. But we want to make sure it not only services this OpenShift portfolio, but there's OpenStack, right? There's other things in the broader Red Hat context that can feed into this umbrella of observability. So that's
Mac on YouTube asked, can the reporting data be piped into a BI engine of some sort? And my assumption is yes, since it's Prometheus, you could transform it and then shove it into whatever BI tool you might have. I've never seen anybody do that though. Anybody here see anybody using like BI tools?
Piped into a BI engine.
Business intelligence. Yeah. I mean, I haven't seen anybody doing that yet, but
people take Grafana and export to CSV, and then you can import. But again, it's if you already have the dashboard. So, but I mean, it's doable. Yes.
Yeah. I mean, I guess what is the use case you're thinking behind putting that data in some other engine versus the one you have? I mean, there might be there might be something that Mac is working on, that's pertinent. So Mac, feel free to email me, cshort@redhat.com with like what you're trying to do, and I can get you an answer.
Yeah.
Right. No problem.
I think we're out of time, we're out of gas, but not out of things to say. So we'll be back in 2 weeks.
That's right. Yes. I was about to say 2 weeks from now, y'all return with the great Red Hat Advanced Cluster Management Present show. Not a specific use case, just curious. It says Mac responding, sorry. Not a use case specifically, just curious, thinking like centralized executive reporting. Well, you could totally do that with what's in the box, right? Like you can build those dashboards for your execs with Grafana, no problem.
Exactly.
Yeah. So look at it that way, right? Like use the tool that's there to build that dashboard the way you want it, right? And that way it's native. There's no conversions. There's no nothing. It won't break when an API changes, right? Like it's just going to be there. So you can totally do that. So yeah, awesome. Thank you all so much for this. This has been great. I love Scott. Scott, I love it when you come on with multiple people and there's multiple screen shares. So just check that box, right? Like, yeah, like, like this was awesome. This was really great. A lot of people tuned in. I'm sure there's some questions. So if you have any, hit me up on Twitter, Chris Short. Hit me up on email, cshort@Red and I'll get them. I'll get them to the team, and we'll get you answers if you need them. So thank you all for joining. Thank you, Joydeep, Randy, Chris, and Scott. And we'll see you all in 2 weeks.
Thanks so much for having us, Chris. Appreciate what you're doing.
Thank you all. This hour just flies by. It never fails to blow my mind how fast.
Wait, we forgot Randy was supposed to sing some Pink Floyd.
Oh yeah, Randy.
We could do it.
Yeah,
we don't want to rush it.
Gotta go.
You gone.
All right, Randy. Thanks for that one.
Bye, y'all.
Thanks again. Bye.